Welcome to week 2. Okay, so let's talk about the mindset piece first. Mindset is so important when it comes to creating a new health and fitness routine, and that's what we're doing here. We're not doing this just for 4 weeks. I'm trying to help you create a routine and pick and choose things that you loved and things maybe that didn't work for you, but things that you can use and tools that you can use well beyond the 4 weeks of the Real Health Reset. So keep that in mind as you're doing this. What's working in this program for you, and what other things can you adjust to work for you in your lifestyle? Because again, those are the things you're going to do. If it works for you, you're going to do it. And that's the whole goal. So let's talk about foods, finding foods that work for you. I want to talk to you today about trigger foods. Trigger foods are foods that will trigger you to either eat more of that food or eat more of the wrong foods. Okay, often a trigger food, sugar, is a really obvious trigger food. You notice there's no sugar in the Real Health Reset meal plans, and that's for a good reason. Sugar is really hard on the body, and it's very, very addictive, and many of us don't realize how addicted we are to sugar until we start taking it away. So sugar, for example, have you ever noticed that when you have a little, let's say a little bit of ice cream, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I really like that. I was just going to have that little half cup. Who really eats a half cup of ice cream? I was just going to have this little bit, and now I want more. And now I want more. Your trigger food might be salty foods. You might even find that your trigger food of salty foods causes you to eat sugary foods. So I want you to start paying. Many of us know what our trigger foods is. Mine is ice cream. If I have a little bit of ice cream, I tend to want more. So I want typically more ice cream. But sometimes you'll find that there are certain foods that'll make you want just more sugar in general. There could be a drink. It could be certain drinks that are triggering you to eat certain foods. It is said that carbonated fuzzy drinks tend to increase our hunger hormones and trigger us to eat more foods. So be paying attention to what foods in the past and what foods currently, because it's just common that you're going to try to stick your best to the Real Health Reset program, the food templates that I've given you, but you're going to throw in other foods. But really be paying attention to which foods are causing you to eat more. Now, what do you do when you find out what your trigger food is? Well, the truth of the matter is that there are 2 types of people when it comes to trigger foods. We have moderators and abstainers, and it's really important for you to think about this and determine what kind of personality that you are. Moderators are people that can tell themselves, okay, I know ice cream is a trigger food for me, but I'm going to eat ice cream and then I'm done. This is it. I'm giving myself this amount. I'm not going to eat out of the bin. I'm just going to give myself this much, 1 cup, and they can have this conversation with themselves and pretty well stick to that. An abstainer is somebody that cannot do that, and they just want to eat the whole container of ice cream. So you have to determine, are you a moderator or an abstainer? Now, the other piece of this is that you could very well be a moderate eater when it comes to pretzels or salty foods, but an abstainer, somebody that can't stay away when it comes to ice cream. So it's totally normal for us to be a mix of both. So determine which foods are causing you to be triggered to eat more or to eat more of the wrong foods. And here's the thing, it doesn't necessarily have to be eating the food that triggers you. Think about this. When you are sitting watching TV, do you find yourself, number one, is sitting watching TV a trigger for you to snack? That's a possibility. When you are sitting watching TV, maybe you're not too bad of a snacker. Maybe that sitting doesn't cause you to want to snack. But maybe it's the commercials on TV that are triggering you to think, oh yeah, look at that smoke rising up from that cheesy pizza. Maybe that is causing you to get up and go get some food. So it's not just foods that trigger us to eat foods. Sometimes it's situations. Maybe it's people. Maybe it's people you're around that you really enjoy being around, and you associate that great time with eating fatty or fried foods or sugary foods or things like that. Just being aware of these things. I don't recommend you leave those people, but being aware of those habits that you have when you're with those people can really take you a long way to determine, how am I going to make my choice when I'm with these people? Make your choice ahead of time. Decide to be the person that brings the healthy food to that get together. Decide to have a certain number of chips when you go out to lunch, or, whatever it is. But just being aware of these triggers are so, so valuable to your success. So I want you to spend a few minutes and jot down, what are your trigger foods, your trigger environments, your trigger visuals, and some of these can also be trigger emotions. Do you associate certain foods with comfort? Maybe it's, jam that grandma made on buttery warm bread, and you have this trigger of a thought of grandma, and now all of a sudden you want that food. So spend some time jotting these things down and really looking this week for what those triggers are, and taking it a step further and coming up with your choice, decision, or action to help yourself not fall into that trigger mode. Let's dive into food journaling. So in the link below, I have given you a worksheet. It's a food journal. It's very detailed. There's a lot of description on that food journal. You'll see in the food journal, there is spaces for your food, the time of day. There's also spaces for how did you feel before and after you ate that meal. There's ways to rate your hunger on a scale of 1 to 10 on how hungry you were when you hit the scale. All the descriptions are in that worksheet. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of food journaling. One of the reasons it's so important is because we become accountable for what we write down. I have the saying I use that what we measure, we manage. And I don't necessarily mean measuring out every little bit of food, but I do mean keeping track of it. Because when you have to write that down, you have to think, well, do I want that extra piece of cheese, or do I want that bowl of ice cream if I'm going to write it down? Now, one of the most important things about food journaling is checking in after you eat that meal, because what our goal here is we want to find out what foods are working for us, what foods are keeping us fuller longer, what foods are keeping our energy level constant, what foods are reducing our cravings, okay? And what meals are doing this, okay? And on the other side of that, which meals are causing us to be hungry quickly, which meals are causing our energies to crash, and what meals are causing us to crave. So it's really important to check in 30 minutes to 2 hours after that meal. Now, keep in mind that the meal plans I've given you are simply templates, right? Because everybody that partakes in the Real Health Reset is going to need a different amount of food. And there might be certain foods for you that just don't keep you full very long. For example, my husband can eat I don't know, like 4 eggs, and he's starving in an hour. And he could then eat like a huge bowl of oatmeal with peanut butter and protein powder, and he is full. Sometimes he doesn't even eat lunch because he's full enough. For me, and he stays nice and trim. For me, if I was to eat that much oatmeal and that much peanut butter and protein powder, I would be packing weight on like crazy. But eggs and vegetables work great for me. So it really will depend on your body and what works for you. And if you get one thing out of the Real Health Reset program, it's that everybody is different, and we have to learn to kind of be a food detective and look into our body and check in with ourselves. And eventually, these meals that work for you are just going to be your go-to meals, and you'll start to expand that variety of meals that you have. So get in the habit of checking in with yourself. Really important to print off food journals and really work at keeping those. I have a couple apps that I like. The links are below. One is called Fat Secret. The other is MyFitnessPal, and I use those tools for keeping track of my food as well. But the food journal I've given you, it really helps you to dive into why you ate, what your environment was like when you ate. Were you stressed? Were you rushed? Were you eating over the sink? Were you relaxed? Who were you eating with? So things like that are very important, because eventually you're going to start to see that when I eat rushed, I don't eat very well. Or maybe you're eating too fast when you're rushed, and so you end up feeling bloated and your digestion's not working very well. So really, and then you eat more because you haven't digested very well. So keep in mind your environment when you're eating. Rate yourself when you go to the table. How hungry are you? How full are you when you leave the table? There's all descriptions for that in the worksheet. But really start getting in touch with the after meal effect. How do you feel? How's your hunger? How's your energy? How are your cravings? Because that right there, when we determine what meals work for you and your body, is going to be the big tool that's going to carry you well beyond the Real Health Reset, so that you are going to be able to choose foods that work for the rest of your life. So go ahead, print out that food journal and get started.
I want to chat with you about habits, creating new habits, because anytime that you're going to create a new meal plan, new workout habits, new mindset habits, you got to know how to set a habit. So I want you guys to understand the foundation of changing a habit. So in a nutshell, a habit has a few parts to it. So you've probably heard the term, it takes 21 days to make or break a habit. Well, that's not entirely true. The point behind that term is that you need some time. You have to give yourself a runway, but you also need the proper tools or the proper roadmap to create a new habit. So first, we have to pick a habit, right? So let's just say drinking water is the new habit that we want to start. Now, maybe you're going to start with something like, I want to drink a gallon of water a day. Now, that's big. Okay, so if you have a big habit that you want to start, I want you to break it down into the smallest possible piece. So if I'm not drinking any water at all and I have a habit of wanting to drink 1 gallon a day, maybe I need to break that down to simply I'm going to drink 8 ounces. Now, that might not sound like very much, but it's 8 ounces more than you may currently be drinking. So you're gonna break that large habit down into the smallest possible piece. Okay, so that's step number one. Choose the habit, break it down into the smallest possible piece. Now, you may not need to break your habit down, but that's an example of a big habit that you might want to create. So step two is we need to create a trigger for the habit. One of the reasons we have a hard time setting habits is because we forget we're even doing it. I often say to my clients, how often do you just forget that you're doing a thing, right? We say, yeah, this is the week I'm going to drink all that water. And you get to Wednesday and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot I was going to drink water. So we need to have a trigger. This is huge. We need a trigger to create that impetus for us to do the habit. So I want you to pick something that is reoccurring in your day. Now, it's going to depend on your habit, what you choose for your trigger, but let's say it's water again. So let's say my habit is to drink 8 ounces a day, or maybe now I've progressed that habit. Let's just start with the 8 ounces a day. I can tell myself my trigger is waking up in the morning. I wake up every single morning. Doesn't even have to be at the same time of day. But if I drink 8 ounces every morning when I wake up, my trigger, I'm good to go. Okay, so I might do that for a week and I have success at that. So the next step might be, okay, now I'm going to pick another trigger. So I'm going to drink 8 ounces in the morning and I'm going to drink 8 ounces at lunchtime. Now, only use that as your trigger if you eat lunch every day, because it's not going to happen. If you skip lunch, you'll also skip your water. So make sure that you pick something that happens every day. In that case, it might be waking up and going to bed. Okay, so make sure that you pick consistent triggers that match the habit you're trying to create. All right, so that's step two. Step three is it's very important to give ourselves a reward when we are successful in accomplishing that habit for that day. All right, so here we go back to our water. If my goal is to drink 1 8-ounce glass of water every time I wake up in the morning, I accomplish it, and I need to give myself a reward. And the reason for that is when our brain receives a reward, when it does something that it likes to do, like a happy dance or a fist bump, or throwing confetti in the air, whatever you deem to be a reward that kind of makes you go yay, then your brain says yay, and it produces a chemical called dopamine. Okay, dopamine is a feel-good chemical, and our brain wants to continue whatever that action was that produced that dopamine response. Sugar gives us a huge dopamine response, which is one reason sugar is so difficult for us to kick. Okay, so the reward will cause your brain to say, yeah, that was a good thing, I want to do that again. So we've got these 3 steps now working for us in full force. We're going to pick the habit. If necessary, we're going to break that habit down into its smallest piece. Then we're going to pick a trigger or 2 or 3, however many times you're going to do that habit in a day. Some possible triggers are waking up, going to sleep, meal times, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Another trigger might be every commute. Let's say your habit is creating your posture. So maybe every time you hit a stoplight, you're going to reset your posture. Maybe you work in an office that has phones ringing quite often. Every time that phone rings, I'm going to do 5 squats, whatever it is. But think about your day and how your day operates, and choose triggers that happen frequently throughout your day that can also match up with that habit you're trying to create. Step 3 is to give yourself a reward so that your brain continually wants to repeat the habit. And again, it may take you longer than 21 days to create a habit, but what happens is a habit, when done over and over and over, suddenly becomes an unconscious behavior. All of a sudden, you're drinking 4 glasses of water a day, or you're drinking that gallon a day. It becomes an unconscious behavior. You don't even really have to think about it. It's very much like when you go to work every day, you get in your car and you just drive. And so many times your brain just starts thinking about other things. You don't even have to think about this left turn and that right turn and that stoplight. It's completely unconscious. It's just something you've done so much. It's ingrained in you. It's a habit. And that's what we're trying to do with these new behaviors. So go ahead and spend a little time figuring out what's the habit you want to work on this week, and create triggers and decide what you're going to do for your reward.
So I want to go into a little bit more depth with you about decisions and choices. So again, very powerful to make decisions and choices ahead of time before you are faced with having to make, a good or an unhealthy food choice. So let's say you're going to lunch with friends. So it's really, oftentimes when we're with friends and we're enjoying the relationships and the fun and the conversation, we kind of just start eating a little bit mindlessly, or we find ourselves falling into habits that these friends, this particular group of friends, we always go to Mexican and we always eat 12 baskets of chips while we're chatting and whatever it is. So number one, look at that group of friends. How is it that you guys normally eat? Is there any way that you could sway the decision to eat somewhere a little more healthy? If not, if it's not necessarily appropriate in that environment or that group of people, look at, okay, so let's say you go to this Mexican restaurant all the time. Can you look at that menu ahead of time and determine which foods are going to fall into categories that work best for you and your goals, right? So let's say there's an option to have a taco salad with no shell, with extra protein on top. Okay, great choice. Maybe you can have that dressing on the side, but I want you to think about this ahead of time. We want to make a decision ahead of time before we're now faced with, we're in this environment, everybody's just talking and she's ordering French fries. I want to order French fries. Make your decision ahead of time and be proud of yourself for making that decision. You are going to be so much stronger when you walk into that environment and you've already chosen what you're going to have. If you're going to a place where, here's another thought on that. If you're at a Mexican restaurant and you know there's those 12 baskets of chips, choose to yourself that you are going to eat certain number of chips or no chips at all if you're an abstainer, and choose that ahead of time. Pay careful attention to how much you're eating. If it's 10 chips, drag it out nice and long so that you can still have part of the conversation while you're waiting for your food, and really drag out those 10 chips. So think about these things ahead of time. The other thing is, if you don't know the restaurant you're going to, maybe you go somewhere all the time, different places all the time, I want you to look ahead. You can find just about every menu online before you get to that restaurant, and that will prevent you from getting there and making a snap choice, okay? So choices and decisions can be super powerful when it comes to trying to stick to, or at least do the best that you can do. Now, I know we get into these situations where we're going out with friends, or we're going to a friend's house for dinner, or we're at barbecues, and there's not really very many good choices. I want you to think in terms of good, better, best. What is the best you can possibly do for your body? Okay. And that's how I want you to think about it. It's not sticking to your plan or your diet. It's what can you do to be the very best to your body that you can possibly be in that environment? And then make the choice to eat that and move on. By now, you have probably run into some obstacles or struggles. Many of us came into this with obstacles or struggles that we know about. And sometimes we don't even recognize them until we're trying to make a change to eat better or move more. So I just want to talk to you very quickly about obstacles and struggles. They're all over the place. We all have our own, and it's really important to identify what they are. For example, I hear a lot of people say, I am just exhausted in the evening and I cannot work out in the evening. If that's your struggle, do whatever you can to either move more in the day, fit a workout in at lunchtime or a walk, or get up early in the morning and get your workout in the morning. Because if you know every single day you are exhausted at the end of the day, the work day, and you're not going to work out, you're just going to go through this cycle where you tend to feel guilty. You tell yourself, yeah, I'm going to work out after work. And then you get home and you're tired and you sit down and relax and watch TV. And then you feel guilty, right? Because you haven't taken action on what you wanted to do. So do everything you can to put that workout first thing in the morning if that's your struggle. That may mean going to bed 30 minutes earlier. And that may mean, if you're exhausted in the evening, going to bed 30 minutes earlier is probably going to be great for you anyway. So that's just one example of an obstacle. Another one I have for you, for example, is I had a client that used to drive by Starbucks every day to work. And it was very tempting. It was a Starbucks with a drive-through. Very tempting for her just to swing right in there, grab her chai tea with lots of extra sugar and go to work. And she found that going to Starbucks for her had kind of an emotional attachment of being a big girl that had a big girl job that could afford to buy a $5 drink every day. And that was kind of a reward for her. Every time she got that Starbucks in her hand, remember that dopamine, it went off saying, yeah, you got a good job and you can afford this $5 super sugar loaded drink, right? So she knew this was an obstacle for her and it was just a strong temptation. So together we created a new route to work for her where she didn't have to go by Starbucks. And that worked for quite some time. And then that urge came back. So what she chose, and I love this, she chose to take the Starbucks app off of her phone, because now if she wanted to go to Starbucks, she had to pull into the parking lot, get out of the car, walk to the register, place her order instead of automatically ordering it up from her phone and doing the drive-through. Now she had all of this time to think about her choice. Do I really need this chai tea with 27 pumps of sugar? Have I moved enough today to use this as fuel? So she had to think about this, and she had to think about her choice, and it really, really worked for her. So I want you to spend some time looking at what in the past week or what in the past lifetime have been your obstacles and your struggles. And to be honest, some of these are a lot easier than others to overcome. But not only look at them, but create action to get around them. You might have to ask a friend, because sometimes for ourselves, it's hard to see that struggle. We kind of rationalize and we just say, well, that's just how my life is. It's just hard. And it's hard for us to see a way around it. Find a friend that you feel like is very trustworthy and you're very comfortable with, and try to figure a way out. If you haven't joined the Facebook group, join my Facebook group, Rocking the Change, and we will certainly help you find a way around your struggle. And now you've got a new action in place. Start with one struggle at a time. Get really good at that, just like habits. Get really good at that. And then you'll start to see other struggles will pop up. And soon you're going to be a master at recognizing struggles and working your way around them. All right, on to nutrition for this. I want to talk to you about meal prep. I have a saying that says, make the right things to eat, the easiest things to eat, and you are much more likely to be successful. And what this means is if you can just spend a few minutes each week preparing the foods for the next week, you are going to be right on course. Because what happens at the end of the day? We've got our meal plans and we know what we're supposed to have to dinner, but at the end of the day, you're pretty exhausted and your decision-making centers of your brain are pretty tired and willpower is probably a little weaker. And we get into the house and we think, I'm just too tired to prepare that super yummy, tasty, nutritious meal, and I'm gonna have popcorn and oranges instead. So I want you to learn how to spend some prepping foods. Now, the way you can do this is look at your week ahead of time. And I want you to pick out the busiest days that you have each week and put the easy on those days, right? So that's one less obstacle in your way. There's not a lot of prep time that it takes to get that meal on the table. So you may choose crock pot meals for those busy days because there just literally is no time to prepare food for your family. So I have in the link below for you a link to my meal prep challenge course. It's a mini course that will teach you my 4P method of getting your food prepared ahead of time. And it's very simple. So you're going to start with the planning, which we've already done. You've got your meal plans all ready to go. So that's taken care of. And then we are going to, of course, got to purchase the vegetables and the meats and all the food. You're also going to spend a little time preparing the meals. And so how I do this is I spend 1 hour on a Sunday evening and I chop up all the veggies, all the onions. I maybe brown some meat. I do boil some eggs. I bake some chicken breasts. I make a gigantic salad. And all of this only takes me, that's just the basic fundamentals. And all this only takes me about an hour. But that means that let's say I'm having a healthy turkey chili on Wednesday. When I get to Wednesday and it's rush time and I got to get somebody off to dance and we just got home from school, all I have to do is go to my fridge, the onions are chopped, the carrots are grated, the zucchini's grated, the kale is chopped, whatever's going in that chili is pretty much ready to go. All I have to do is open the bags or the containers and put them in the pot. So all that work and all that cleanup is already done. It will make a huge difference in your life. If you have not done the 168-hour worksheet, I guarantee you will find at least 1 hour of time that you can find in that work by doing that worksheet. You can find in your life that you can spend preparing your food, because this is something I hear often. People say, I don't have enough time to prepare healthy meals, but when you spend just 1 hour, even if you only have a half an hour, get as much done as you can, you're going to see it makes eating healthy so much easier when those foods are right on hand. Also, if you come in and at the end of the day and you want a snack and you say, oh yeah, I need a healthy snack. I've got zucchini and celery, and however, now I have to wash it and I have to chop it and I have to, peel it. If you have to do all that, again, you're more likely to go for a handful of chips. So even having your snacks prepared can take you a way to eating the right foods. So download the link down below for the meal prep challenge. You'll get a few emails every couple days kind of walking you through the challenge to help you out with that this week. Okay, this week's fitness is going to incorporate high intensity interval training. I want to explain to you how that works. So you're going to see on your week in view plan 2 to 3 high intensity or HIIT workouts in each week. Now, if you have not done any high intensity training intervals at all, I want you to tap these lightly. I just want you to think of these as dabbling and pushing yourself a little bit harder. I want you to make sure you have checked with your doctor and that your heart is in good shape and that you are approved to do these kinds of exercises before jumping in, because high intensity interval training is just that. It's high intensity work. So that means you are going to get huffy and puffy and you're going to get sweaty, you're going to get out of breath, and that is the point. So the beauty of high intensity interval training is that we're going to ramp your heart rate up there. We're going to increase your body temperature. That's where the huffy and puffy comes from. I want you sweaty. I want you really feeling like, wow, I can't do a whole lot more. Now, keep in mind, don't be scared about this, because you could be doing the same type of exercise that your grandma is doing right next to you, and she might be doing it at a modified level, or maybe you're doing like a high knee sprint in place and she's just walking at high knees. If you're both out of breath and huffy and puffy, then you're both getting high intensity interval training. In the PDF below, you'll see I have a scale for you. It's called the RPE scale. It's called the Rate of Perceived Exertion Scale, and it's just a way to rank how hard you're working on a scale of 1 to 10. You'll see in the PDF that it says 1 is like getting out of bed. Basically, your heart rate's not really doing a whole lot. You're very relaxed, no discomfort at all. And you'll start to climb up that scale. A typical warm-up is going to feel like about maybe a 5 on your scale of 1 to 10, which again is different than your grandma's, right? So when we get into high intensity interval training, you're going to find yourself at about a level 9 on your scale of 1 to 10. You should be thinking, wow, I have a whole minute of this exercise. I don't know if I can finish a minute. And now if you can only finish maybe 30 seconds of that minute, then maybe you're working a little bit too hard. So you might want to back it down just a little bit. But I do want you to put those effort levels to about an 8 to a 9 on your scale of 1 to 10. Okay, so check out that PDF below so that you'll know what I'm talking about. When it comes to HIIT training, if you ever feel dizzy, if you ever feel nauseous, take a break and give yourself some recovery. You definitely want to be drinking water during these because you're going to be sweating a lot. But the beauty is, by ramping up your metabolism really high for a short period of time, it's kind of like turning a thermostat in a small room up to, say, 150 degrees. Now you walk in that room and you're like, oh, it's hot in here, right? And if you turn that thermostat off, you know it's going to take that room quite some time to come down to a normal 70-degree temperature, right? Same thing with your body. If we can ramp that up, we've ramped up your metabolism, it's going to keep your metabolism elevated. And studies show this, that HIIT training can keep your metabolism elevated for 12 to 36 hours after your workout. So the high intensity portion of these workouts is short. It's kind of, I want you thinking in terms of fast and furious, but it is short and it's done. Okay. So push yourself as hard as you can during those of course, during those high intensity interval training workouts, because you're going to get that metabolism raised up and it's going to stay elevated and working for you for hours after the workout. Now, keep in mind that these workouts rest-based workouts, which means I want you to push as long as you can. So let's say I have you doing a minute of mountain climbers and you have to take a break at like 46 seconds for just a few seconds just to catch your breath, and you need a little bit of rest. That's totally fine. Take as much rest as you need, but get right back into it as soon as you feel like you can, all right? So the idea is to push yourself, but we're all at different levels. So I want you to push yourself as long as you can, rest until you can go back to it. But don't give yourself too much rest, because that's where the body gets stronger, gets more efficient, and that's where we crank up the metabolism even higher, is when we challenge it to push just a little bit harder than is normal.